Make sure you stick to the end for a bonus tip. So the first way to get stronger in preseason is to actually do deep ranges of motion strength training. And the reason for this is because if you do deep ranges of motion strength training, it takes a lot more strength to be able to get into that deep range of motion and to get out of it than it normally would to actually get into a shorter range of motion. And some might argue that deep ranges of motion are not important because they are not sport specific, but the idea during preseason is to build strength. And you want to get as strong as possible, and this is why you actually have to go into those deeper ranges of motion. And also, football requires you to be in a lot of weird positions most of the time, and your body tends to go through a lot of motions that you're probably not even used to. So by allowing your body to go into deep ranges of motion, even though it is not sport specific and even though probably 80% of the time you wouldn't be there, that 20% of time where you do have to get into that position, your body wouldn't suffer and you actually wouldn't be so likely to get injured because you have trained yourself to be in that position before. Now, examples of full range of motion training are ass to grass squats and also doing a long lunge to work on that deep range of motion for the hip flexor, which tends to be one of the weaker muscles in the body because people tend to neglect them when they're doing their strength training, as they tend to train the bigger muscles a lot more often. Now, as you get closer to in-season, you can definitely cut those ranges of motion shorter, and what you'll also realize is that you are able to lift a lot more weight with that shorter range of motion because it doesn't require that much of strength. But with that, now you're able to get a lot stronger in that smaller range of motion, and you're also able to get a lot more sport specific because in sports most of the time you do not go all the way through your range of motion. Now for this deep range of motion training, you want to aim between 4 to 6 reps of each set for each exercise, and you also want to make sure that you try and reach failure within this 4 to 6 rep range, and don't be afraid to reach to failure and be sore, because in preseason you can afford to do that. What you can't afford is to go into in-season and then to actually get sore and not be able to perform during your matches. And preseason is when you can actually push through the soreness and do a little bit extra. Just don't go overboard and get yourself injured. And I would also recommend that you do a full body session every time you go to the gym, because if you do an upper and lower split, then you tend to have lesser days where you're training all the big muscle groups together and you're training all the important muscle groups. So if you do a full body session, you just get to train your body a lot more, because if you do 3 full body sessions, then you're hitting all those muscle groups 3 times in a week. Whereas if you do an upper and lower split and then you do 1 full body session, you're actually only hitting those muscles twice a week. Now, if you're getting value out of this video, please hit the subscribe button down below, and let's move on to the second point. Now, point number 2 to get the most out of your preseason strength training is to do complementary exercises that target the muscle groups in a different way. This means that you try and find exercises that are different, but they work almost the same muscle groups every time you're in the gym. So let's take the chest as an example, and you go to the gym 3 days a week. Now on day 1, you could do something like a bench press. This would work your chest, your shoulders, and your triceps. And on day 2, when you go to the gym again, this time you could do something like a shoulder press. Again, it's going to work your shoulders, your triceps, a little bit of your chest, but it works almost the same muscle groups, only to a different extent, and different muscles are targeted slightly differently, whereas load is put on one muscle more than the other. And then on day 3, you could do something like a push-up, an archer push-up, or even a half kneeling shoulder press. And push-ups and archer push-ups will teach you to move your body in space, whereas the half kneeling shoulder press will teach your body stability because it will challenge your core. And these again work almost the same muscle groups, but they hit them in a much different way. And this way you get an all-round target to all your muscles, and no muscle is lacking in any way. And you also get to save time in the gym because you don't have to do specific exercises for specific muscle groups like a bodybuilder would. Now obviously with the half kneeling shoulder press, you also wouldn't be able to lift as much weight as you normally would with a regular shoulder press. But the idea here is that since you're going to the gym 3 times or maybe 4 times a week, your body would be sore, and because you have a lighter weight to manage, your body would be able to recover slightly from that session and do better in the next one, rather than you pushing and pushing through and eventually getting injured because your body isn't ready for that load yet. Now, point number 3 is to include stability exercises into your training. So like we talked about the half kneeling shoulder press, you want to include complex multi-planar movements into your training sessions with weight wherever possible, And if you cannot handle the weight yet, then definitely you can do it without weight as well. And this is very important because it will train your stabilizer muscles, which often go neglected because they are the very small muscles in the body, and we just tend to train the big muscle groups that we have. And the reason for this is because football is a 360 unpredictable sport, and it requires a lot of movement in a lot of different planes. And also, if you've had an injury before, these complex movements will bring out any imbalances that you have, and you would realize how stable or unstable you actually are by doing these exercises. So some examples of these exercises are half kneeling shoulder presses, a back lunge into a calf raise, a single leg RDL with a knee drive, calf raises without any support. Now all of these exercises would require total body control, and it will also challenge your core in a way that you've probably never felt before if you've never done any of these exercises before. Now of course initially you would have to use lighter weight, but once you get used to it, you would realize that with your bigger lifts, you'll be able to probably lift more weight because your stabilizer muscles are now much stronger and they're much more active. Now, a bonus tip for all of you that stayed till the end, always remember to work on your core and your hips. These are probably the most neglected part of your body, but it's one of the most important ones because all the force and the power that you generate all comes from your core and your hips. So make sure you train them so that you do not suffer any injury and you do not get injured very often. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.